All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. And if you are watching this, you're going to notice that all my backgrounds will be different all the time because I'm officially a backpack princess and I feel free and like flying, but hopefully I keep the content just as good. And on today's podcast, I have a dear friend of mine. And when I met this man, it looked like he walked off the cover of a magazine. And I was shocked to know his age because he is a master at helping people live in the deepest level of alignment and like experience boatloads of vitality. And so on today's podcast, it is incredible. It's loaded with nuggets. We talk about how vulnerability should be authentic and not used as a tactic for attention or sympathy, how living in alignment requires constant effort and a willingness to do what's right, even when it's hard, how you have to know your values and integrate them into your daily life. And that's the key to living a fulfilling life, how to evaluate your present values in your life and take inspired actions to honor them, how to practice time management and time blocking to prioritize your values and create a schedule that aligns with them, and how to connect with your why and purpose and focus on making a positive impact on others, which is the true secret to happiness, in my opinion. And so today we're joined by my incredible friend Zarak. And so without further ado, I'm going to stop bumping my gums. We're going to get into the episode. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. And this is going to be probably one of the hardest intros that I do because I have a man crush on today's guest, and there's not a better way to say it. But you've heard for years like the statue of David. Well, when I met this beautiful man, I was like, you belong on the cover of a magazine, and you have the heart, the soul, the connection, the empathy, and every trait required to be there and stand for what you truly believe in, because I have been touched so deeply by the depth of this man, the power of this man, the empathy of this man, the skill set of this man, the experience of this man, and not to mention, and I will not share his age, but just his existence made me feel like I'm old. And then when he told me his age, I'm like, I'm going to get out a pen, I'm going to get out a piece of paper, and I'm going to take notes, because if you look like that, I have goals galore. And so he is an absolute rock star. And the word that always comes to mind when I think of him is vitality, and really genuinely living, embodying it, and helping people unlock it. And he has more experience than me in many, many buckets: 12 companies, 25 years in hospitality, literally personal development, and really focusing on helping entrepreneurs be in alignment at the deepest levels through holistic approaches by learning themselves, loving themselves. He's a breathwork facilitator. He is just a walking renaissance man, and I don't know how else to put it. So if you happen to see him on the cover of a Vogue or anything, I promise you he belongs there, but now you're just going to get the full experience. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend Zarak. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That is a very generous introduction, and you're making a brown guy blush here. So
Yes.
we go
Yes.
purple. Brown guys go purple when they blush.
I
Thank you.
love it. We're
Thank you.
just out here. We're out here creating Barneys in the world, but I genuinely mean it, man. And before I even ask
Thank
you
you.
anything, I just want to thank you. Thank you for being an example of what you teach. I genuinely remember the moment we met, and it was like instant. I felt safe. I felt home. I felt seen. And then the deeper and deeper I got, I'm like, who is this guy? And I was like, I'm getting the Indian experience of like bursting every paradigm I have from like a healthy, heart-centered man. And so it just genuinely, I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, my man. And it takes one to know one. So thank you for seeing me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, brother. Of course. I felt like time collapsed when we talked, and I was like, I could just hang out with you all day, every day. Like I want in. And so, for everybody listening, I was talking to Zarak before the show, and he hit a vein for me on something that I struggled with for a long time. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my life, especially in the last couple of years through some deep, deep compression, is the power of forever being a student, but really living in alignment at the deepest level. And there were a lot of parts of me that I pretended to share with the world, but really I struggled behind the scenes like a duck with my feet under the water. That was like the self-created prison. And one of the things that Zarak and I were talking about is vulnerability. And I feel like it's one of the almost hidden addictions or epidemics of like, it's wrong to be vulnerable. It's wrong to share. It's wrong to be a human and have your experience. And I couldn't think of a better man to kind of unpack this. And so Zarak, I kind of just want to give you the floor and kind of help you unpack this, because this is something that you've walked through and you've lived through, and it's such a powerful, profound experience. And so can you kind of talk about the power of vulnerability and I'm just going to give you the floor because I can't tee it up as well as you're going to
Yeah,
say it.
thank you so much, George. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you and your community. So, vulnerability is something that I haven't always been good at as well. And it is what has really allowed me to um, transform my life in many ways and just evolve to become the man that I am today. Because for most of my life, I projected an image of success, of glamour, luxury, coming from the nightlife industry. I owned very successful businesses. I drove fancy cars. I wore expensive designer clothing. And all of that was rooted in not wanting to let the world see who I believe myself to be. Growing up, dealt with a lot of racism, bullying, not fitting in, always being the last kid to get picked for any sports teams. I grew up feeling like I'm going to show all of you just how cool I can be, just how buff I can be, just how successful I can be. And that identity I created, that false self, served me well for many, many years. I made a lot of money, dated a lot of beautiful women. I've lived a very blessed life. And it was really rooted in the insecurity and the ego. And it was all great until I realized that that identity and that person I had become was actually the guy that was in my way of me finding true love, me creating a fulfilling, successful career that really was meaningful to me. And also, he was a guy who was blocking me from really discovering who I am on a deeper level. And, many of us go through this moment where we take a step back and we question, who am I? What am I here for? Why am I wasting my time doing certain things? And it's in that moment when you have those questions that you have the opportunity to actually look beyond the mask and go within to try to find the answers for those questions. And that happened to me in around my 40th birthday. And I knew that I was repeating certain patterns in my life and that I was unconscious to them, but I could see that I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And when I began my personal development journey, I had to look beyond the mask. I had to confront um, and reconcile the hurt little boy who never felt good enough. And I was so blown away to discover that I've been living completely unconscious, living with very little intention for 40 years, that once I started to peel back the layers and realize that there's this awesome guy who's just buried beneath the insecurities and the labels and the all the things I did to make myself feel better about who I didn't think I was, that I felt compelled to share it with other people. I felt the need to be open and tell other people what I was going through, even though I knew I might get judged, even though people may not necessarily understand where it was coming from. I knew I wasn't alone. And my openness and my ability to become vulnerable. What's ironic is most people don't want to be vulnerable because they are afraid of looking bad. They're afraid of being judged. And what I quickly realized is my vulnerability actually garnered me more respect, more admiration, and more connection with others because I've lived a pretty, privileged life, and I've, reached a certain amount of status. For people to hear me open up and share and be so raw and real, it completely contradicted what they thought about me. And I wanted to use whatever influence I had to let people know, like, look, regardless of the car you drive or your body fat percentage or who you date, all of that doesn't mean anything, because who you think that person is not who they actually are most of the time. Like, a lot of the most successful people are the most insecure people. A lot of the most beautiful people are the most hurt and damaged. And this is why they're obsessed with the gym. This is why they're obsessed with looking good. And I speak, say this from my own personal journey. And when I started to be vulnerable and open up and share, I was now giving other men and women permission to step forward and share as well. And I would say that vulnerability is something that I avoided most of my life. And it's now become almost like my superpower. It's become a bit of my edge, because I really don't give a shit about trying to look good and trying to avoid certain topics, because when I can be raw and real, we can connect on a deeper level. And, as you say, relationships beat algorithms, and in that
Mm-hmm.
deep connection, that intimacy is where true connection happens. And being able to create the space to lead and to be open and to give permission to others allows them to really contribute and share what's real for them. And that's where a deep bond and connection happens.
Yeah.
And vulnerability is what I lead with when speaking with my, specifically my male clients, because I work with a lot of guys who are highly successful, have done great in life, but I can see it's that pain from the past. It's a hurt little boy who hasn't been seen and loved and taken care of that is driving a lot of the behaviors in the background. And until you reconcile and make peace with that little boy, he's going to cause you to keep doing things that are going to sabotage your health, your success, your love, your relationships. And it starts with vulnerability and being willing to look within, being willing to sit down and have that conversation with that little boy, and just letting go of the ego and the identity that you've created to be willing to heal. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, so much in there and so much I love. I remember when that little boy was driving with the illusion of control, where my entire identity was wrapped up in the results I created or the choices I made instead of my willingness to just try. And so I have a question about that, because, you talk about, being willing to look at that inner boy or inner girl, or, something along those lenses. And people ask me about, personal development all the time, or my inner work. And, there's the things that we see that people post, but then there's what really, really happens behind the scene. And one of the things for me is, I feel like a trap I struggled with early on was thinking that there was a finish line to vulnerability. Like, oh, I found him. I love that little boy now. I'm out, right?
Yeah.
Or it's good here, right? And so as you started, a two-part question, and I can remember both, but first one is like, it sounds like you had a catalytic moment, and I feel like I did as well, multiple of them. But how does one go about really starting to look in, but not from a place of fault, blame, guilt, or shame, but really from a place of like self-love and self-acceptance, to even give a permission slip to explore the feelings of that inner child or that inner story? Like, what was that like for you? Or like, what can people do to really start dancing with that?
Yes. So recognizing the patterns and the behaviors that don't feel aligned,
Mm,
noticing where you're sabotaging yourself, and being willing to investigate what is the belief that I have, what is the story that I'm telling myself, and where did this originate from? And I'll give you an example. So for me, I'm 49 years old, and I'm still single, and I realized that my relationships were never able to go beyond the first or second year because I didn't know how to go deeper when the honeymoon phase was over. I didn't know how to ask the hard questions. I didn't know how to speak my truth and confront my partner if there was something she did that hurt or offended me. And because I was never able to go deep with anyone else, I was never able to really allow for those things that are, as I said before, those things that are meaningful that need to be spoken about, allow them to come up, because fighting and disagreements is necessary for people to learn about one another, to grow and evolve together, and to deepen that connection. And part of that not wanting to be confrontational and open up and share is because we can only meet people to the depths that we can meet ourselves. And I grew up in a household where my parents fought a lot, and I grew up listening to arguments and hearing my mom talk about marriage feeling like jail, and one day when we're old enough she's going to leave. So for me, I wanted to stay in the novelty and honeymoon stage. I never wanted to go deeper. So then identifying that my parents' relationship and their inability to communicate has left an imprint on me that's now showing up in my relationships. Okay, well, I can let this pattern repeat itself like many people do. And I'm going to end up in a relationship where I end up arguing with my partner all the time, or not arguing and just deeply resenting her and doing other things. Or I could say, what do I need to learn? What do I need to let go of in order for me to be a better communicator, in order for me to open up and share authentically and being vulnerable and being able to break the pattern that my parents have been repeating throughout their marriage. So identifying the belief and then being willing to explore the originating cause, the originating incident, and then asking yourself, what is there for me to learn about the situation? What are my choices here? Is
Yeah.
is where it needs to start.
Yeah, it reminds me of a mutual friend of ours, Kate
Hmm.
Perkovic, and we were doing an intensive, and she blows my mind with what she knows. But one of her rules is if it's a pattern, it's a problem. So pause and take a look at the pattern, right? And in talking about this, I feel like vulnerability is this term that's almost like spiritual bypassing right
Yes.
now. Like
Yeah.
it's thrown around all the time because vulnerability is not something you do. It's not like a checkbox of like, oh, I'm going to share my
Mhm.
feelings or I'm going to do this. It's like who you are. But in that lens, I also would love your thoughts on this because I feel like when I started to dance with this quite a few years ago, and it took me many, many failures and many more painful lessons to get there, is that vulnerability almost became my new hiding place
Okay.
because I would lock onto a feeling, but then I would put that old inner boy on, and I'm like, I'm going to do vulnerability. I'm going to
Mhm.
tell everybody I cry. Like, I'm going
Right.
to tell everybody. And then there's a part where, and I'll say this honestly, and I haven't talked about this before, but like, I've been on over like 7 or 8,000 podcasts now in my career.
Wow.
And if you go back to 2009 when they started and you listen to any of them to 2016, every intro is identical. And I was like, oh, I'll be vulnerable. Let me tell you about my sexual abuse. Let me tell you about my bulimia. Let me tell you about this. But I
Mhm.
used vulnerability as
Right.
the new strategy and tactic
Like
because
the
it
hook.
wasn't really
Yeah.
being vulnerable. It
Right.
was the hook, right? I was like, if I tell you everything,
Hmm.
then you're going to think I'm being vulnerable when in actuality, I'm just hiding behind this new wall.
Right.
And so I would love your thoughts on like kind of deconstructing the label or like what it means or even examples of like vulnerability because it's not really, in my opinion, this finish line. It's not I have the answer or I found this pattern. It's more so I'm willing to look at this
Hmm.
and figure out how I feel about it, knowing that my feelings change
Yes.
quite often and it's okay. But like, how does somebody go about
Hmm.
number one, like navigating that, but number two, also articulating it from a place of responsibility, not just another label or this thing, oh, you triggered me or like and gaslighting people.
Yeah, that's a great question and a very powerful distinction as well, because if you're using your vulnerability to be the victim, to get attention, to get clickbait, to you know um, invite sympathy or whatever, then I feel you are using vulnerability in an inauthentic way, which is a paradox in itself. Inauthentic vulnerability, right? I feel that if you're going to be vulnerable, don't be the victim. Be vulnerable and share how you have triumphed over the situation, what you've learned from it, how you can be grateful for what that situation created in your life. So you're being vulnerable, you're being raw and authentic, but in an empowered way. And you're not
Yeah.
using it for sympathy, because I can speak about my parents and their lack of communication and how it affected me then. And I can express gratitude for the fact that my parents didn't know how to communicate, because their inability to communicate is what's inspired me to become a great communicator. And I could say that about any of the situations that some may deem unfortunate or unfair. I have been able to see them for what it is, ask myself what there is to learn, and also take the perspective that God doesn't give me anything that I can't handle or that I don't need. And any of those situations, I feel grateful and blessed for, because it's allowed me to become who I am today. And it's taught me necessary lessons that I can now pass on to the people that I coach and work with. So I feel that being vulnerable and coming across as the victim, knowing that you can or have triumphed over it, is out of integrity in the sense of being authentic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I just wanted to tie this together too because you were talking about your partner, right, and relationships, but these are every relationship. These are the same things, and I know you see this with your high achieving clients. It's the same thing that causes the lack of depth with their team
Mm-hmm.
or the lack of safety in their employees or in their culture or in their company, right? It's this constant thread that we see it in the most closest intrapersonal relationships,
Yes.
but we don't compartmentalize. And so how we are in one area is how we are everywhere, and it
Yeah.
requires this deep level of willingness to go there. And I love this because very rarely do I get to talk to men about this and vulnerability. And I would love your perspective on this as well, because I think with me personally, one of the things that I struggled with a lot is when I would be vulnerable, I would also place unspoken expectations on how it was received.
Okay.
And it was like this sneaky little pep, like, well, I'm being vulnerable. Why don't you tell me how you feel? Or like, why aren't you going to validate me? Or why don't you have me here?
Right.
And so like, how do you, like navigate some of these pieces? Because you help so many high achievers
Mm-hmm.
really get into their feelings and have grace
Mm-hmm.
for themselves and self-acceptance. But I also feel like vulnerability creates all these little sneaky little triggers that push that little boy or that little girl back up to the surface. So
Yeah.
like, how do you go about when, really finding that pattern, right? Like just using that as an example of like, oh, I see this pattern like every time I hire somebody, right? My favorite personal development quote is like, let me guess, different boyfriend, same breakup, different boss, same result, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like at some point you got to recognize the pattern. But then in that, how do you go about like truly owning that from a place of like, this is really for me, and I have to be unattached to how it's received, because if not, I'm really playing in that victim vein.
Yeah. So what I noticed, to your point, is many of us share the same traumas. We share the same experiences, just of a different flavor. But for the most
Mm-hmm.
part, both men and women experience a lot of the same challenges. And where I will open up and be vulnerable when the time is appropriate is if I know one of my clients is going through something, but he doesn't know how to articulate it, or he's feeling self conscious and he isn't used to speaking about something so sensitive, so deeply personal. I will let him know that I understand what he's feeling and I can connect to his pain or his anger, whatever he's experiencing, and I'll share with him a version of my situation, of what I've experienced. And often, just in me sharing, he feels open to expressing, because again, I've led by example, and he could see that what I'm sharing with him is so deeply personal, and that I'm sharing without any concern of judgment or criticism. I just say it as it is, and and he then understands that he can do the same with me. And I feel that leading by example, especially with the men, and sharing from an open, raw, honest place is something that can be such a powerful catalyst for creation of openness and space. And that is something that, again, when I share, it's not with the expectation that they're going to reciprocate and share back. I just know that in my sharing, they can see that where they're at and what they've been through doesn't make them unworthy, doesn't make them unloved, doesn't make them wrong or bad. It's just what happened. And
Yeah.
I can speak to my situation and how I've overcome it and what I've learned. And that in itself can be enough for that person to feel better about what they've been through. And ultimately, when they feel safe, they will open up and share. And there's no pressure for them to respond. It's just an invitation for them to speak what's been suppressed if they should feel
Yeah.
called to.
Yeah, I love that because I feel like even in that same vein, and whether anybody caught this, but the first thing I thought of is like, even as entrepreneurs, especially us that serve customers, right? Like our willingness
Mhm.
to be in our power, which means self-aware and self-accepted, but to be vulnerable is really the catalyst that's needed for
Yeah,
our clients or our customers to have breakthroughs.
absolutely.
Because you're a breathwork facilitator, right? Our energy precedes us. People
Yes.
are attracted to what they know, and we tend to attract all the versions
Yeah,
of our former selves, where our story serves as a catalyst for them when we own that.
absolutely. And, you know, to also bring things down to an equal playing field, I let them know, like, yeah, I might be a coach and I've done this work for 10 years, but I'm still struggling. I still
Yep.
got my fair share of demons and things that I'm working through. And I may just be a couple of years ahead of you, but trust me when I tell you, I've done some crazy shit. I've been through some tough situations. So nothing you say is going to come off mess as, like, a mess or anything to be self-conscious about, because I let them know that we've all been there. We've all done things we're not proud of. And this is our space. And I'm your person for you to be able to tell me the things that you can't tell other people. And trust me, nothing you're going to say is going to surprise me,
Yeah.
and then when I share things that probably most men wouldn't tell them about myself, they realize, like, okay, you know what? This guy's not joking. Like, it is the real deal. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me, I got tickled on this because like you and I do similar work, but this is why when we met, it was like instant, like we knew each other forever, because it was like, no, no, not 10 feet, 20 feet. We were like 10,000 feet deep instantly
Yeah.
because we dance. And I posted this the other day, and I was like, my job as a leader is to be the environment that allows growth to happen.
Hmm.
And really that requires our vulnerability. And so one of the things that you said earlier that I would love for you to unpack is alignment, right? It's a
Mm.
word that I use all the time. And it's also something that sometimes I struggle in explaining to people, like what alignment means at the deepest level. And so I'd kind of love to hear from you, like when you say alignment, like helping people get aligned at the deepest level, like what does that really encompass?
Hmm. Yes. So one of the first things I like to establish with the men and women that I work with is, what are their core values and what do they truly stand for? Not who do they think they need to be, or what accomplishments do they think they need to have, but more so, like, strip all that away, the possessions, the money, the status, all of that. You take all that away. What are you really about? What are you here for? What are the pillars that define you? Because if you're not clear on your values, you don't know what to live in alignment to. And many of us, we inherit our values from our parents, from society, from peers of who we think we're supposed to be. And we might have a job, or we may live in a certain neighborhood, or we might be putting our time and energy into certain things that actually are misaligned with who we really are. And again, men have a lot of pressure to perform, to provide, to be the strong man who is very stoic. And the truth is a lot of men are in a lot of pain, and they are doing certain things that are out of alignment with who they really are. And because that creates pain and suffering, they're then self-medicating in whatever way they think works. But we all know it doesn't work, of course. And living in alignment and being in integrity to what you stand for, it can be challenging at first because it may completely go against the life that you've created. However, once you start to live in alignment to your values and you choose to honor who you really are with full integrity, you start to experience that flow of living life in congruency with who you are on a soul level. And magic starts to happen when you are in that state of joy, bliss, and gratitude rather than resentment, shame, guilt. And that is really the the end goal with how I want to serve and support the people I work with is, let's really get clear on who you are at your truest essence. What is the vision you have for your life? What is the legacy that you want to create? Now, who do you need to become to achieve that and to fulfill that legacy? And what do you need to let go of? And what are you willing to take on to live in alignment? Can you choose every day to honor those values? Can you look in the mirror and feel proud about who you are? Because being in integrity requires work, consistent effort day after day. And being in integrity doesn't mean being perfect. It means doing what's right, even when it's hard, over taking the easy route out. And when you live in integrity, you look in the mirror, you love who you are, you know you're a person that honors your values, and you're in alignment to, your words align with your actions.
Yeah.
You have a level of confidence. You have a level of self-esteem and pride that other people can feel. You walk in the room and people can feel that. You are now a force. And I believe that many people are living out of alignment, draining their life force energy, working in opposition to who they really are because they don't even know what their values are. So I really feel like that is step one to creating your dream life, to finding your dream partner, creating your dream job. You got to know your values and choose to be in alignment with those values 24/7.
Yeah, dude, I love that. And I want to ask you like what some of your values are as well, so people can kind of paint
Yeah.
this picture. But I God, it had to be one of my coaches like 10 years ago, and he's like, just remember, it's not what you do, it's what you tolerate. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that one tickled for a long time
Yeah.
because similar to you, and I'm only a few years behind you now that everybody knows how you look so incredible at 49, and I'm like, geez, I got some work to do. Um, like I'll share this very vulnerably, but like I have this photo on my phone and I showed you, and I remember like on paper, everybody was celebrating me. I was making, $500,000 a month, every house, every car, everything. And I was 260 pounds at 5'7", and not one person said anything to me. And the more success I had, the deeper the hole I fell into of like feeling like I'm dying. And, it was one of those things where I never took the time to be like, what really matters to me? Like what I value, which is like time with my son
Yeah.
and freedom to come to San Diego and end up in late night conversations with you without having to check my phone all the time,
Right.
or, those presencing things. But I love how you said it, like integrity takes work because it's a
Yes.
moving target. Right. And so, I would love to hear, just as an example, like what are some of your values that you stand by and you crave?
Yes. So number one is freedom, being able to live my life on my own terms. When I left entertainment and hospitality, I knew that I wanted to work where I want, when I want, with who I want. So freedom is a big one for me. Health, obviously. I have been training since I've been 18 years old. Full transparency. I started working out of a place of insecurity, just wanted to be buff, just wanted to meet the girls. But, I've seen how living a healthy life for 30 plus years has allowed me to reach this optimal state at 49, where biologically my DNA testing says I'm actually 35, which has been a result of me just taking care of myself, having integrity to my health for nearly 3 decades. I would say as well, adventure and learning, always pushing the envelope, always wanting to step out of my comfort zone, being the student. Even though I'm a high school dropout and I got kicked out of 3 high schools, when I find something I love, I'm passionate about, I go all in. Connection, I'm a community builder, which is why I was in hospitality. So I love hosting get-togethers and events where I get to meet, new amazing people. And I would say that it's learning, adventure, health, freedom, and connection are
Well,
really,
and just
yeah.
just for everybody to laugh, we've been on 3 or 4 calls in the last month, and I've been on a call with you so I saw you in San Diego. I
Yeah.
had a call with you in Austin. I had a call with you in Colombia, and
Yes.
now I'm having a call with you in Toronto. And
Yeah.
so you really embody that freedom when I want, where I want. And then even at dinner, you're showing me like National Geographic style photos of you in India and all these other countries, and it's beautiful to witness. And so I want to unpack this a little bit more, because now in hearing those values, you're like, the deepest level of alignment is kind of knowing what you stand for. And then
Yes.
now knowing that you stand for those things,
Mhm.
I've seen those all embodied in your life, and really like contribute to your vitality. And so when somebody finds their values like at the
Mhm.
deepest level, how do they go about, integrating or implementing those things? Because I feel like, and I'll just crucify myself on this
Mhm.
one, I even treated values like a finish line. And then I'm like, all right, I'm burning my whole life to the ground. I'm just doing this over. And like, I was the king. And even my ex-wife laughs and she's like, you were literally the king of 6-figure businesses. Like 5 times in 1 year, you launched one, got it. And then you're like, nope, I'm out, close it, do it again. Because there wasn't really this like deep implementation or embodiment of
Mhm.
my values. And so once somebody gets aware of like what they stand for and what are their values, how do they go about bringing their life into
Mhm.
alignment in a imperfect manner, knowing that it's this, step-by-step process?
Sure. Great question. And something that I, help my clients figure out as well is um, I ask them what their 5 values are, and I have a whole process for them to tap into those. And then I ask them to evaluate from 1 to 10, how present are those values in your life? Because again, when you're living out of alignment with your values, that's when you're going to feel the resistance. That's when you're going to feel frustration or just the lack of joy because you're not doing what actually lights you up. So, for me, for example, with health being one of my values, I'm always asking myself, okay, what supplements can I take? What training can I do? What does being in great health mean to me? Now, what are some of the inspired actions I could take to honor my health? For example, I'm training for my first triathlon for my 50th birthday, as a
Yeah.
way to celebrate this next chapter of my life. Turning 50 is a pretty big milestone. I want to start it in the best health and condition of my life. So looking at, okay, so if connection is one of your values, what does connection mean to you? How do you describe connection? How can you embody connection in actions, in being intentional? So maybe it's spending more time with your family, like you mentioned. Spending time with your son is deeply important to you. Okay, well, how much time does would you like to spend with your son, and when are you scheduling that into your calendar? When are you time blocking and saying, no, you know what, every Sunday for 4 hours, me and my little homie, we're going and we're doing something fun, and that is a non-negotiable for me, and that's it.
Yep.
Okay, so learning is important to me. Okay, great. What does learning look like? Is it podcasts? Is it reading? Is it learning Spanish? Is it taking a new course? Okay, great. Which of those really lights you up, and are you willing to commit and schedule it in? And are you willing to remove and let go of the things that aren't of high priority to you because they're not aligning with your values or not as important as your core values? Are you willing to let those go? So it's about looking at those core values and asking yourself, what would it look like to really embody those, putting more time and energy into them, and then doing the research, committing to things you haven't done before? Like, I've never done a triathlon. I'm a shit swimmer, but I've hired 2 swim coaches, and I'm getting in the water, and I look like someone who's just floundering out there. But that's what I'm willing to do to become a great swimmer, so I can compete in my first triathlon. So does it scare me? Yeah, it scares me. And on the other side of that fear is a lot of pride and a lot of acknowledgement and appreciation for myself. So being willing to go outside of the comfort zone and do the research and commit to doing the things that, even though they may seem scary and unfamiliar, to honor those values, because when you do, the sense of fulfillment and joy that you feel when you are living in congruency, in alignment to those values, trumps everything else.
Hmm. Yeah, you said something earlier about, what are you willing to give up or something like that. And I remember one of my first personal development coaches when we would have to do this. So I'm going to tie a few things together. Number one, what I love that you said for me to summarize is that when you get clarity of your values and what's in alignment, you also have to get clarity on the texture and what it would look like
Mhm.
so you can give yourself a workout to start the process. Because even if you couldn't hire 2 swim coaches, you could go watch 3 videos on YouTube and go to the
Absolutely.
pool and start learning how to swim, right? And it's really creating that first bite. But what I used to love is when we were in those inspired actions, they had to be smart, right? Specific, measurable action, results, time.
Right.
But then one of the questions that they'd always make us face is like, what are you willing to pay, or what's this going to cost you? Right. And oh, it's going to cost me going out with my friends and drinking. It's going to cost me blank. It's going to cost me people judging me because I don't want to take calls. And like, even with my little homie, because his school is 4 days, right? It's Monday through Thursday. So my calendar's blocked Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And every Friday, Saturday, we go get a hot chocolate and coffee, and we go drive my vehicle off-roading for 3 hours. And we try to break it. I'm like, where can we get stuck? Where can we get lost? Where can we go find a bear? And like, that time is like sacred for me, but also being willing to face like, maybe I'm not going to make an extra $1 million because it's not worth me being on my calendar and being on calls every single day of the week. And I found for me, when really like coming to the it's a sobering thing to look at, like, what am I willing to pay for this, or what am it willing to cost me, was like one of the biggest breakthroughs for me. And so I just love like how you articulate it, and like also being the example of it, because like the first thing you told me when I met you, like, I'm doing a triathlon for my 50th. I suck at swimming. I'm going to do here. And even when we started this, you're like, I got shin splints. I'm like, I have a solution for you. And like, you're constantly readjusting and protecting those values.
Yes.
And then, like you said earlier, having the discipline to understand that like being in integrity takes committed action, right? If we already were that way, we would be that person and have those results. And so it's like a workout at the gym, and you have to protect the game, right? Like, I didn't get fat in a day, and I couldn't get unfat in a day. I had to take these small micro bites to get there. And so with that, on values and alignment, how do you navigate, or maybe a better way to ask it is, how do you run and operate your day to really be aware of like your practices, your habits, your modalities, to ensure that you're staying in alignment, but also not ending up in that like blinders on, I'm going to go down this road constantly and maybe not end up where I want to go? Like, how do you navigate that?
So time management and time blocking. And I literally have my calendar color coded into different subcategories that are related to my values, related to my priorities. And I schedule my days according, so that I know that first 2 hours in the morning, that's for my morning practice, my meditation, my movement, anything I need to do in that morning. And that's a non-negotiable. And then because I'm training sometimes twice a day now because of my triathlon training, I put those in. And then I designate my days. So Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have client coaching calls. Fridays, I will accept some, but I have certain days designated to certain tasks. And, you mentioned something earlier, which was like, you take those days off work so you can be with your son. And yeah, you may make X amount less. And knowing that you may not make as much money, what does that bring up for you, right? And one of the things I've struggled with is scarcity, growing up with family that live check to check. Now that I'm making money from coaching, it's like, okay, well, I should just work as much as I can then to try to, make as much as I can. But these years, these precious moments with your son, regardless how much you make, these moments that you have can never be bought. You can never have them again. So recognizing that there are certain things that are important to me now that make my overall life better, that yes, I could work an extra 8 to 10 hours a week, go to the gym less, do less hikes with my dog. Would I make more? Maybe in the short term, but would I be happier? Because I believe that when you're honoring your values, you're living in that state of flow, feeling joy, bliss, and gratitude. That high vibrational state is what attracts abundance to you. So it's about thinking about the long game, not the short game of let's work as much as I can, make as much as I can, and scheduling your days in integrity, managing your time, blocking out what's necessary for you to achieve what you say is important to you. And like you said, yeah, maybe it's like cutting out, going out to the bar with some friends, or, sitting on the couch to watch Netflix, or any of the things that are wasting your time, that are not in alignment. They need to go. If you truly want to create a great life, if you just want to live an average life and, be somewhere, in alignment with what you want, then yeah, you can keep doing that. And there's no judgment about that. But I don't think you or I or anybody listening or watching this is here because they want to live an average life, right?
Mm-hmm. I also want to call out something that I heard underneath what you were saying, and I know you do this intentionally, but I feel like it's really powerful to bring presence to, is that not once have you said, I schedule my work, and then after that's in, I then schedule in all the things for me.
Right. Yeah.
You schedule in the things for you, and then you use the space that's left to put in the activities to then fill in to achieve those goals. And I feel like that was a trap that I fell into for years, until my dear friend Clay Hebert sat me down one day and he's like, no, we're doing the perfect calendar. And this
Mhm.
broke me, bro. Like, it broke me. And he pulled out 365 days. He's like, how many vacations do you want to take? How many times do you want to do this? How many massages do you want? When are you
Mhm.
going to the grocery store? And I was like, dude, I can work, 60 hours a week. And then by the time I was done filling in all the things that genuinely brought me happiness, I realized there was only like 2 hours of my day left. And I was like, oh, that's a powerful exercise to
Yeah.
really bring presence to those things. But then the hidden byproduct of it with Parkinson's law is that, you'll fill whatever container you create. And it made me recognize that I used to take 8 hours to do something. And then when I eliminated the window down to 2, I could accomplish the same thing better in a shorter amount of time, because I had that perspective of prioritizing what like truly, truly mattered. And the reason I ask this, and you coach both men and women, but so many in that high achieving space. And I find this often as well, to where there's this false finish line
Yeah.
of toxic thinking, like, oh, well, I'll go have fun when I achieve X, or I'll take that vacation when I achieve Y. And that starting line or finish line consistently gets moved. And then you get to the point and you just nailed it, to where, like, my son's never going to be 7 again. He's
Right.
never going to be 8 again. And there's going to come a point where I look back and I'm like, oh, I never scheduled that trip. I never took him on that drive. And so how do you help people navigate that, and really, like, what are the hidden things you see people miss? Cuz like, I know fun is big for you, and being present is big for you, and like having peace of mind, which looks a little bit different for everybody, but I feel like one of the traps is like consistently moving that down, and then really genuinely never being able to feel vitality or feel life. And so, like, how do you navigate that with people?
Yeah. So typically, when someone's ready to work with me, it's because they've been successful, they've made money, they've checked the boxes with all the things that we're told we're supposed to have, but they know something's missing. And not only something's missing, they're frustrated, they're unhealthy, or they're just not happy, they're missing that joy. So they recognize something's missing. And when we take a life evaluation from 12 points, we can see where they're out of alignment. And when they're out of alignment, they're feeling resentful, frustrated, guilty, ashamed. Sometimes clients work with me and they're like 30, 40 pounds overweight, or they're, as I said, self medicating or whatever. And I explain to them the concept of how your emotional state impacts your energy and your vibration, which then impacts your health and your ability to attract opportunities, your ability to align with the abundance that you want. So I'm a big fan of Dr. David Hawkins' map of
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, and explaining to clients, showing them the data that these emotional states have certain frequencies. These frequencies correlate with the things that you want in life. If you're feeling guilt, shame, anger, frustration in any part of your life, you are lowering your frequency, which means you are actually blocking the abundance that's there for you. Because, like you said, many entrepreneurs think there's this race, they think there's a certain timeline they have to be on. The first thing I say that blows their mind is, I ask them, how long do you think you're going to live? Like, yeah, maybe 75, 80 years if I'm lucky. And I ask them, well, what if you could live to 120? How would that change how you spend time with your kids? How would that change how much time you work, where you're investing your money? And, a lot of us grew up with parents and grandparents who passed away in their 70s or 80s. And the way that modern medical science and technology is advancing, we are going to be the first generation that gets to actually choose how long we want to live. And living to 120 and beyond is not unrealistic. So whatever finish line they think there is, if they think, okay, I'm 45, I've got maybe another 15 years of work, 20 if I'm lucky before I retire. And then if I make it to 80, I'm okay. Well, if you're 45, let's say you're just 1/3 of the way of your life, how does that change your perspective as to how much you think you need to work? And just that reframe of giving more time, and there's not this race, and that you actually have much more time and space than you think, allows them to kind of reshift, reframe their timeline. So helping them to understand that when you do the things you love, you're living in alignment with your values, you're doing the things that bring you joy, bliss, gratitude, and you're in those higher vibrational frequencies, synchronicities and extraordinary outcomes start to show up in your life. You're in a state of manifestation. And I know for some people, they don't necessarily believe in this concept because they consider it to be woo-woo. But I can say from my own personal example, and for dozens of my clients that I've worked with, I tell them, do less and be more. Do less of the things you think you need to do. Be more of you are. Be more of who you are. Hang out with your kid. Go on those hikes. Be healthier. Be more of who you are on the level of your values. Let that be your priority. See what shifts in your emotions, see what shifts in your energy, and then watch what shifts in your reality. And once they get a taste of that and they realize, holy shit, I'm working less, I'm having more fun, and I'm making more money. Wait a minute. That's not what we're told in school. That's not what we're told about how to be successful. It's grind harder than the next guy or girl, bust your ass, you got to no pain, no gain, and all that. And that's how we're going to reach the top. And that is an old, archaic paradigm that is causing many people to get sick and die and even take their own life because they're just miserable and unhappy running in the hamster wheel.
Yeah. I even had a friend of mine, Dr. Romy the homie, another Indian. She let me know how uncultured swine I was because I told her butter chicken was my favorite. And she's like, that's not even a dish. So I got reamed yesterday, but we were talking about the stress success cycle and the broken paradigm of this trap. And really what I love about your questions and your states of thinking is it forces this perspective shift. And one of the traps that I see all the time is us not recognizing or realizing that we already have everything that we claim to want, but we're not showing up in a place to enjoy it or be with it. Right? Like, I want more time, money, and freedom. I'm like, great, give me your phone for a week. And all of a sudden you won't let go of it. I'm like, wait, but I thought you said you wanted more time. Like you can have it. Right. And it's building this relationship with being able, like you talk about, tuning your reticular activating system into that frequency to be able to see the things that are there, not this toxic thinking of like, it will come down the road or it will be there. I have a couple like really easy questions, but before I do, because like I'm a big fan and your boy, but I'm going to tell everybody your Instagram now because I think everybody, number one, needs to see what, the 49-year-old magazine cover looks like, but really as a place to connect with you, because like, I also love how your brain works and like even your content and what you post and what you share and what you document. And so for everybody listening, we're going to have this in the show notes, but I highly recommend you connect with him on Instagram. And so his Instagram, is it Zarek?
Zarak.
AK, right?
Yeah, Zarak.
Yeah. So his Instagram is Zarak. And how do I pronounce your last name?
Fatah.
So it's Zarak Fatah. And I'm pretty sure you might be the only one, but if not, it's in the show notes.
Yeah.
But it's Zarak Fatah. And so couple like really, really easy practice like questions. Like number one, like I know you're a breathwork facilitator, but like what are like some of your non-negotiable practices that allow you to stay in this state, to stay in that place of vulnerability, connection to self, awareness? Like what do you like? You're like non-negotiable. This is what I do every day.
Yeah. So I love to live in environments that are inspiring, that are surrounded by nature. And whether it be in the mountains, near the ocean, or surrounded by forest, for me, my environment has a big impact on my energy. So I'm very conscious about where I choose to live and obviously who I surround myself by. I like to spend time alone as much as I'm an extrovert coming from the hospitality industry. Spending time alone and being able to just be quiet is something that also allows me to recharge and nourish myself. And for those of you who may or may not know, human design is something that is very helpful for you to know and understand what is in flow with your human design that allows you to keep your life force energy, to preserve it and to live in flow rather than resistance. So human design is something worth looking into. Obviously, eating healthy. I eat organic as much as possible. I don't drink. I don't do drugs unless you consider psychedelics from time to time, any sort of drugs. But, I've lived a very healthy lifestyle in that sense. And taking time in the morning to just really reflect, to journal, to just be with my thoughts. I'll sit out there on the back porch, listening to the birds, feeling the grass under my feet, and just allowing myself to go within and just being with whatever's coming up and giving myself that space before work starts, before the emails and all the craziness of the day. Just let me just get grounded. Let me feel what's going on inside. Let me process whatever I need to before I begin my busy day. So I think, reflection and just being able to process whatever's coming up is important. What else? As I said, movement. I train pretty much daily. If I don't go to the gym, I take my dog out for a walk or a hike. That's important for me. Yeah, I would say those are some of the non-negotiables, and just reading, learning. I'm either listening to a podcast or reading a book, or just always wanting to learn and expand my knowledge. Yeah.
My ego's gloating because I'm like, did everybody hear this? Like the things that I've been preaching for like 500
Yeah.
episodes now of like, those sacred light keeper quadrants where I'm like, you need a stillness practice. You need
Yeah.
to be out in nature. You got to get grounded. You have to move your body, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to invest in yourself at the future self that you want to be
Absolutely. Yeah.
so that you have the capacity and the awareness to be able to navigate whatever challenges come up, to check your alignment, to make sure you're in it and really be able to stand in it. So I love that. And, I don't know. I'm just going to ask a random question. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you feel a burning desire to share?
Yeah. So one thing that just came up for me when we talk about alignment and we speak about the future self, I'm 49. I'm going to be 50 in August. And I know that I'll probably be a father by, let's say, 52. Now, I'm going to have probably a 20-year-old son, an 18-year-old daughter, and I want to take them hiking. And I want to go on epic trips with them. And I want to be able to run on the beach and just do all the things that my father couldn't do with me now. And in order for me to be that person, it's dependent on the choices I make today. So when I think about alignment and I think about my practice and I think about why I'm disciplined, it's because I know what type of father I want to be. I know how I want to show up for my wife and my kids. And for me to be that man, it requires me to be disciplined and dialed in every single day. And I know you as a father who's active, who likes to do all kinds of fun stuff with your kid, who's also had his fair share of health challenges and uh, extreme situations. You work very hard and consistent, and you have these practices so that you can show up for your son and for everyone you love in the way that you do. And I feel that when you connect to your why, when you connect to who you want to be, how you want to show up in the world, the legacy that you want to create, that has to be so present that that is a driving force. That is a burning flame within you that has you get out of bed, put on those shoes and go for the run. That has you, pushing the boundaries to jump in a pool and flounder like a drowning fish, drowning fish or a fish out of water.
Yeah.
when you don't know what the hell you're doing, and I think that's important, is really connecting to your why, understanding your purpose, and just choosing to be that person every day.
Yeah, brother, I'm actually really glad I asked that question, because that is one of the prettiest bows on the present of the box of today that we could put in. Yeah, so I have one more, but I'm gonna say this again. I'm very humbled in my work, and I feel like the longer I've been in this, the less I know, and the more I try to surround myself with people like you. And I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate you, what you stand for, what you speak about, and just the positive impact that you've had on my life, just in our short knowing each other, and then realizing the like 100 mutual connections that we have. And I'm like, how did we not know each other
Right.
before?
Well, I told you I
Um,
was actually on your mailing list for probably a year, and I didn't know it was you. You know, when I met you, I'm like, George, right? Wait a minute. I went to my emails. I'm like, oh, hey, you're that guy. Yeah.
yeah, it's so good. It's so good. And so for everybody, I highly recommend connecting with Zarak, and we'll put everything in the show notes,
Thank
and I'll
you.
definitely have him back on in the future in person whenever
Yes.
I
Yeah. I
get
want to
another
come down and
studio
visit you in
built.
Montana. We do this live.
Yeah, and so his Instagram is Zarak Fatah, ZarakFatah, and then I have one question, and I
Mhm.
love asking this question. So just assume that everybody listening up to this point forgot absolutely everything that you told them, and you
Mhm.
have the ability right now to tattoo a piece of wisdom on their soul that they take with them forever. What
Yeah.
would your tattoo wisdom be?
Yeah. So I am a big believer that our souls chose to be here during this pivotal time in human history for a reason. And I believe that we all have some gift, something to contribute to the collective, and that is our journey. That is our mission to discover while we're here. You know, I was a nightlife guy selling expensive vodka and sushi, you know, for many, many years. And I didn't know that I had this in me. And it took a moment of realization. It took I would say, almost a rock bottom moment for me to take a step back and ask, question, what do I want my future to look like? What am I really here for? And it's an important question that we all need to ask ourselves, because fulfilling your outer purpose and making lots of money and buying nice shit is, yeah, you know, it's fun and all, but at some point it's like, okay, what else? And when you begin that journey of looking for your inner purpose, and you start to really discover what you have to offer and the special gifts that you bring to this world and people around you, life just becomes so much juicier. You know, like the feeling of fulfillment, the feeling of being able to touch and inspire and help other people far supersedes the Maserati and the model girlfriend and the $50,000 watch and all that, you know, because that's all fleeting. But
Yeah.
the difference you make, the impact you create with others, that's what you take to your grave. That's what you celebrate as you transition from this dimension to the next. And,
Yeah.
you know, being someone who's experienced many of the beautiful perks and luxuries of life, yeah, it's fun, but that's not the gold. The gold is not what we get, but what we get to give to others.
Oh, I
Yeah.
couldn't have said it any better, and I'm so glad you said it. That even encompasses 500 episodes of this podcast into a beautiful little 1.5 minute gift. And so, I just want to thank you again. And for everybody listening, selfish ask, I would love it if you took the time to send Zarak a message with like just your biggest takeaway from the episode, like what tickled the most, like what landed, because I know he loves hearing it and he
Yes,
loves connecting
please.
with
Love
people.
to hear that. Yeah.
And it's definitely been magical. And so, brother, I just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. And I'm going to stop ringing everybody's ears right now, and we'll wrap the show. And so I
Thank
can't
you for
even
having me.
do,
Yeah.
oh, dude, of course. I can't even do this episode justice with how many nuggets and deep pieces of both, philosophy, but all the way down to integration and implementation on like what it looks like, and you being the example. And so, my invitation is not to let this be shelf help, but not to overcomplicate it either. Just pick one thing and give that thing a chance and be
Yeah.
consistent with it, whether it's your
Absolutely.
values or changing a practice or
Yeah.
learning something new, and start embodying these pieces that will bring you into alignment, or sharing your feelings and authenticity, or any of those different pieces will have a profound impact, but they don't happen once. It's a muscle that you flex every single day that you choose to keep working out. And so if you
Mhm.
want to get stronger, you go to the gym consistently. If you want to be
Mhm.
more vulnerable, you flex it consistently. If you want to change who you want to be in the future, you flex it more consistently. And so, take this as an invitation, is the reason you're listening to this and heard this today in this moment, and let the wisdom of this beautiful man tickle your soul and get you into action. And so we're going to wrap the show. So all of you listening, I love you. I appreciate you. You will either see me in the next episode or you'll hear me in your earballs. But either way, we are out.